Imagine being the ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world. You control vast lands, treasure beyond measure, and the loyalty of millions. But your empire's most intimate and private institution isn't as majestic as you'd think. Welcome to the world of the Ottoman Harem, where strange and terrifying rules governed everything from the way you slept to the power struggles that played out behind closed doors. Picture this. You are a woman in the harem of the Sultan, prized, coveted, yet constantly at the mercy of intricate rules that seem to have been designed to break your spirit rather than nurture it. You would think being a member of the Sultan's inner circle would mean comfort, luxury, and unimaginable power. But in the harem, nothing is as it seems. There are strict protocols for who can be seen, who can touch, and even the most basic human interactions are governed by a shadowy set of rules, passed down through generations. You won't believe how intense the regulations were that shaped life inside this once mysterious world. Prepare yourself as we uncover the strange, bizarre, and often chilling rules of the Ottoman harem that you didn't know. What if I told you that the harem wasn't just a place for the Sultan's wives and concubines, that it was more than just a lavish residence filled with silk cushions and treasures from around the world? The word harem itself translates to forbidden or sacred. But behind the velvet curtains and golden doors, the reality was far darker and more complex than most of us realize. At its core, the harem was a powerful political institution. Yes, it was a place of luxury, but it was also a place of ruthless ambition, cutthroat rivalries, and careful manipulation. Women weren't there simply to keep the Sultan warm at night. They were pawns in a much larger game. Their fate often rested on who could master the art of manipulation, alliances, and betrayal. Imagine living in constant tension with other women, knowing your entire future depended not just on your beauty or charm, but on your ability to navigate the endless labyrinth of politics that came with being a concubine or wife of the Sultan. Your survival could depend on a simple look or a seemingly insignificant gesture. Now let's dive deeper. Inside the harem, one question was always on everyone's mind. Who would become the Sultan's next wife, or more importantly, the mother of his heir? But don't be fooled by romanticized depictions of the harem. The women living in the Sultan's harem weren't there because of love or affection. No, they were there because their families knew the stakes. They had to prove themselves not only in beauty and elegance, but in their ability to manipulate, intrigue, and align themselves with the right people. This wasn't about affection, this was business. There were so many rules, so many unwritten codes, that the women of the harem had to learn how to work within the system. But there was one rule that separated the successful from the forgotten, bearing the Sultan's child. And it wasn't as simple as just getting pregnant. No, the harem's politics were complex and cruel. In fact, you had to outsmart every other woman vying for the Sultan's favor, all while maintaining an image of grace and poise. You think you know what happens behind closed doors in the Sultan's harem? Think again. These aren't just passionate love affairs hidden under the velvet drapes. The real story of the harem's bedroom rules is far more bizarre and uncomfortable. Let's start with the first rule. The Sultan's bed was a political tool. Imagine being chosen to share a bed with the Sultan. It wasn't just about satisfying his desires. Oh no, it was about a strategy. The Sultan would often rotate between his concubines, and this wasn't a random process. Each visit to a woman's quarters was calculated, a way to secure power and forge alliances. But here's the kicker. The rules for who could spend the night with the Sultan weren't about personal connection or love. They were based on hierarchy and timing. If you were a concubine who hadn't been chosen in a while, there were specific rituals to prepare for the Sultan's visit. It wasn't just about beauty. It was about being in the right place at the right time, looking the right way, and following the precise instructions of the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, who ruled the harem behind the scenes. The harem's bedrooms weren't just private quarters. They were battlegrounds, arenas where strategy, control, and power were everything. If you were one of the Sultan's many concubines, your room could be your sanctuary or your prison. The pressures and regulations on your behavior were enough to break even the strongest spirits. So what else went on in the Sultan's private quarters? Well, there was a secret so forbidden that no one was ever allowed to speak of it aloud. The Sultan's midnight rituals. Every night after his private affairs, there was a ritual that was kept so secret, so hidden, that only the most trusted members of the harem knew about it. Some say the Sultan would enter the most sacred part of the harem, not to make love, but to connect with his spiritual advisors. Others say it was a moment for the Sultan to solidify his power over the women who lived there, reminding them that no one, no matter how close they were to him, was ever truly in control. But the most shocking part? The Sultan's nocturnal rituals were just as much about control as they were about pleasure. The women in the harem were often subjected to humiliation or tests designed to remind them of their place. If you made it through these trials, you might be given a spot in the Sultan's inner circle. If you failed, you would disappear into obscurity. Power wasn't just maintained through politics, it was reinforced through fear. The Sultan's harem was a system of constant flux. Women could rise to prominence and power in the blink of an eye, or they could fall just as quickly. The rules governing this institution were clear: survive and thrive by being cunning, manipulative, and above all, adaptable. One of the strangest rules of all was the power of the gözde, the most favored concubine. If you were chosen to be the Sultan's gözde, you had the chance to change the course of history. But there were risks involved. The title of gözde didn't just mean you were the Sultan's favorite. It meant you were constantly on display, under scrutiny, and open to the possibility of betrayal from your fellow concubines. Every move you made was watched, and every mistake could cost you everything. And let's not forget about the women who were sent to the Topkapi, the palace's infamous prison. These women weren't punished for breaking the law. They were punished for being too powerful, too influential, or simply for outliving their usefulness. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful yet often forgotten figures in the harem, the Valide Sultan. She was the mother of the Sultan, and her power was absolute. Imagine being the woman who controlled the fates of all the concubines in the harem, the woman who could make or break the future of a woman's life with just a word. The Valide Sultan didn't just reign over the Sultan's bedroom. She was the true ruler behind the scenes, dictating the movement of the women who served her son. In many ways, the Valide Sultan was the shadowy figure that lurked behind the velvet curtains, her voice the most powerful of all in the harem. If you thought the Sultan ruled with absolute power, think again. The harem's true power often lay in the hands of a woman who had mastered the art of manipulation and influence. Every woman's fate in the harem was bound by the same unyielding, heartless set of rules. Some women might rise to unimaginable power and prestige, becoming the Sultan's most favored and influential consort. But for the majority, the inevitable truth was that once you no longer served a purpose, you were discarded with brutal indifference. There was no second chance, no escape from the system that governed every aspect of their lives. And amidst the complex web of power struggles, wealth and deceit, there was one truth that lingered like a shadow over every woman in the harem: death. A woman's life in the harem could end in ways that were as varied as they were horrifying. Some would meet their end through the swift and final hand of execution, ordered by the Sultan or the unseen figures of authority behind the palace walls. Others would suffer a slower, more insidious fate, poisoned by a rival, or left to wither away in an isolated corner of the palace, forgotten and ignored. The harem, with all its beauty and opulence, was a place where a woman's life could be snuffed out without ceremony or care, her body discarded like an object that had outlived its usefulness. And for all the stories of luxury, wealth, and favor, the reality of life in the harem was far darker than most would ever imagine. The women who filled these chambers were often trapped in a ruthless game of survival, where their existence was defined by how well they could manipulate, appease, or outwit the Sultan and the powerful figures who controlled their lives. Many of these women would never see the Sultan again once their favor had been lost, fading into obscurity without so much as a final glance from the ruler they had once been so close to. Their legacy, if it existed at all, would be nothing more than a brief mention in the history books, their stories reduced to mere footnotes in a grand narrative of power and politics. The ultimate cruelty, however, lay in the fact that even if a woman managed to leave the harem, she was never truly free. Once a part of the Sultan's world, a woman's soul was forever tied to it, bound by the very system that had stripped her of her individuality. Even in freedom, she was forever marked, her life shaped by the invisible chains that had held her captive in the palace. The identity that had once been hers was now fractured, shattered by the harem's power, an indelible mark that could never be erased. Now that you've learned the shocking truths about the strange bedroom rules of the Ottoman harem, you might never look at history the same way again. The harem wasn't just a place of luxury and opulence. It was a twisted system of politics, manipulation, and power struggles, all hiding behind the walls of the Sultan's palace. If you think you know everything about the Ottoman Empire, think again. The world of the harem was filled with far more than just love and intrigue. It was a world where women were pawns in a game they could never win, where every step they took could either bring them closer to power or to a devastating fall from grace. Don't forget to subscribe for more shocking historical truths, and tell me in the comments what other historical secrets you'd like me to uncover. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet.